The Earthbound franchise is one of my favorite video game franchises of all time. I love almost everything about these games. From the gameplay to the unique characters, there's just something about it I love so much. But for all my years of playing through these games, a question has always stuck out in my mind. Why do Ness and Ninten look so similar? They both have red caps, have black hair, can use psychic powers, have moms with blonde hair, dads who are never home, have a nerdy friend with glasses, and a girlfriend who has blonde hair who can also use psychic powers. And this makes me wonder, are these similarities just a coincidence, or could they mean something more? Hello and welcome to Alpha Leaf Gaming, where today we are going to find out what the relationship between Ninten and Ness is. Over the years, many Earthbound fans have come up with their own theories. Some are as far-fetched as reincarnation, while others are as simple as two kids who just happen to look like each other. Now, most of these theories all suffer from the same problem. They're good theories, but you just don't have a whole lot of evidence in the games. But it doesn't hurt us to look at them, so we'll look at each of these theories one by one to see how likely they are to be true. The first of these theories is that Ninten is Ness's father. This theory states that after the events of Mother 1, Ninten and Anna got married and had Ness. Now, out of all the theories, this is my favorite. I just think it's so cool to have the main characters in the games be related in some way, and it makes them feel so interconnected. If this theory is true, it would certainly explain why they look so similar and both have psychic powers. In fact, there's a couple bits of evidence in Earthbound to support this. During the scene while Ness sees himself as a baby, we can see that Ness's red cap used to belong to his father. And who else wears a red cap? Also, if we look at some of the artwork of the game, we can see Ness's mom holding a frying pan, and a frying pan was one of Anna's weapons in Mother 1. So there are obviously a few things pointing to this theory, and while I really love it, there are so many holes in it. The biggest of which is time. There's not nearly enough time between the two games for this to work. In the Japanese version of Earthbound Beginnings, it states in the intro that the game takes place in 1989, while Earthbound takes place in 1990X. So if we take 1990X to be the latest date possible, which would be 1999, that still only gives us a 10-year gap between the two games. And Ness is supposed to be 13 in Earthbound, so he would have to be born around 1986, so if these are the dates, then yeah, it can't be possible. But in the English translation of Earthbound 0 and Mother 1 plus 2, it states that the game takes place 80 years after the early 1900s. Assuming that it's the earliest date possible, and George and Marie got kidnapped and returned really fast, then the earliest date Earthbound Beginnings could take place would be 1980. That would increase the gap, but we can actually increase it even more if we take 1990X literally, and interpret the X as meaning 10 in Roman numerals, which would mean 1990, or 2000. Now, let's do some math to see if this theory is possible. Ninten and Anna are 12 in Mother 1, this would give them birth year of 1968, and Ness is 13, so he'd be born in 1987, and this would leave us with a 7-year gap between Mother 1 and Ness being born, with Ninten and Anna being 19. And since pregnancies take 9 months, they would have most likely been 18 when they would have, Ness was created. So while it is possible for Ninten to be Ness's father, we would have to make so many assumptions. Plus, there's a lot of evidence in games to disprove it, like the kid in Twinkle Elementary School who mentioned Super Mario Bros. 3, which came out in '88, or all the other Nintendo references. And the games most likely take place in the year they came out, 1989 and 1994, so as cool as this theory is, I find it pretty unlikely to be true. Next, we have the most interesting of the bunch, the alternate timeline theory. This theory basically says that after the events of Earthbound Beginnings, Gygas went back in time and changed history, altering minor things. America is now called Eagle Land, certain PSI moves like PK Beam no longer exist, and V8 melodies are completely different. Ninten was reborn as Ness, Anna as Paula, Lloyd as Jeff, Teddy as Frank, and Pooh existed in Mother 1 as a character we never got to see. The timescale is also interesting. Ninten is supposed to be 12 in 1989, and Ness is supposed to be 13 in 1990X, and since X can be anything, it could be 0, and if that's the case, it would mean that they were both born in the same year, 1977. Out of all the theories, this one makes the most sense to me. It explains how all these characters and lands can be so similar yet so different at the same time. But a few things don't make sense, like if Gygas was gonna go through all that trouble time traveling to alter history, then why didn't he just make it so Ness would have never been born? Plus, making any change to the past whatsoever could create a butterfly effect that could completely change the way time plays out. So if you went back in time 100 years ago and, I don't know, stole someone's sandwich, the whole world could be destroyed or something like that. So while this is a pretty solid explanation, it does leave us with a few holes. Next, there's the theory that Ness is the reincarnation of Ninten. If you're not familiar with reincarnation, it's the belief that after you die, your soul is reborn as a new living thing, usually with a lot of similarities with your previous self, but with a few slight differences. So the idea here is that in between Earthbound Beginnings and Earthbound, Ninten died and was reborn as Ness. This theory does, however, require a 13-year gap, so we're gonna have to stretch the dates a little, but it's at least not as unreasonable as 20 years. The only difference between this and the alternate timeline theory is that according to this explanation, both games would take place in the same timeline instead of a huge convoluted multiverse. Unfortunately though, almost all the evidence for reincarnation also applies to the alternate timeline theory, so I guess just choose whichever one sounds better to you. I mean, they both state that they're the same person, but maybe neither of these are true, and Ninten is in Earthbound, and we've just been looking in the wrong place. Maybe Ninten is Buzz. After all, he doesn't use any offensive PSI, he knows a lot about Gygas, and has met Starman Jr. who appeared as a boss in the first game. Maybe Ninten got transformed into a bug when he traveled back in time. Dr. Andronauts did say that the phases storer couldn't take living things, so either Ninten transferred his soul into a bug drone, or his body transformed while time traveling. Either way, it would explain why Buzz knows so much about Gygas' plans. And finally, we have the most likely explanation. They look alike just because they happen to look alike. They're not the same person, they're not related, they're just two kids from small towns with psychic powers with black hair who wear the exact same clothes. I know this is disappointing, but there just aren't enough details in the games to come up with other explanations. I guess we all just have a weird fascination with connecting dots that are never meant to be connected in the first place. But after making this video, another question has come into my mind. Where does Mother 3 fit in? Could Ness be an ancestor of Lucas? Could Ness be in Mother 3? If you want to see this video, be sure to tell me in the comment section below. And also, wait for me to save up enough money to buy a GBA player and a Mother 3 Pro card. Also, be sure to tell me whatever I got wrong down there too, because I did my best researching, but I'm guaranteed to get a few things wrong. You can also share any theories you come up with down there, if you want, like you have any other theories. But anyway, this has been Josh from Alpha Leaf Gaming.